Thanks, James. And hey, Janie, how are you doing?
I'm good. How you doing, Barry?
And welcome everybody to the final session. So I guess we stand in between the session and happy hour, at least on the East Coast. So my name is Barry Parshall. I am the gaming practice lead at Lean Plum, working with pretty much all of our gaming clients at Lean Plum, helping them monetize and retain their players. And with me is the star of the show, Janie. You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, great. I'm not, just a humble person here. My name's Janie Parasini. I'm the Senior Director of Mobile Marketing and Growth at Electronic Arts, EA. And I will try to keep you entertained until your beverage after this session.
Very good. Well, I guess the first place to start is I wonder how many people, listening in on this are wondering, why are the two of us doing a presentation together in the first place? And what I mean by that is, at least in my past, in my experience, I've usually seen a fairly kind of thick line between the user acquisition function of a marketing department and all that tend to happen downstream: the retention of users, the monetization of users, and so forth. I've often seen kind of a throw it over the wall mentality. Here are your leads. Here are your users. Do whatever with it. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you're at least at EA, you're changing that mentality as a direct consequence of what's going on with iOS 14.5, which of course has been the big topic of this entire session or this entire conference. So now maybe that's a good place to start. Maybe you could talk to us about what you're doing at EA as a direct result of what's taking place with iOS 14.5.
Yeah. So my mentality about UA not being this get users, throw them over the fence, didn't really start with iOS 14. It's just iOS 14 has been like a change agent for other UA and growth teams, I think, to think about the same mentality that maybe I've had. And I'm not smarter than the average, so probably others have thought about this too. But the kind of the thought is, if UA people only think about new users and throwing them over the fence, they don't really feel the need to make sure those are quality users, make sure that the product team understands how to monetize those users. There's always a good friction between UA and product, where product will yell at UA for bringing in shit players and UA will yell at product for not monetizing them well. And that's always been like a good UA product tension. But now I think about it like my growth, the team I built at EA, the team I built at DraftKings are top-notch talent, and they can also do lifecycle marketing with the right technology, with the right principles in place. And the thought there is moving not just from what's our new user growth number, but also growing retained revenue. So retained revenue growth as a metric, being accountable for that, as well as being accountable for now new players as well. So it's basically like full stack growth instead of just, well, this is my UA team, this is my lifecycle team, and they don't really talk. So that's the mentality that we have now, and that has only emboldened us with the privacy changes, which makes it even more important for us to grow our existing user base. Given that Facebook's not doing as great of a job anymore driving new users or high value users. It's, the privacy stuff makes it murky to know exactly who your players are and who they aren't, and making sure you're not wasting money. And it's always been better or maybe not better, but ignoring our existing users has always been something that I felt like was just untapped growth, that people would always be like, well, that's a hard work. So we're just going to drive new user growth, and it'll be the Band-Aid, or it'll smooth over the issue that we have, which is like a leaky bucket, or we don't understand how to grow our user base, but we'll just keep driving installs because it's cheaper than actually trying to fix this problem.
Interesting. So what have you done anything specific to kind of prepare your team for turning into more of a full stack marketer?
Yeah, there's a few things. Data, making sure that the data is is all the way through in-game. I mean, most UA teams look at revenue and they look at in-game metrics. So now it's just an extension of that. So now it's more segmentation too. So we segment and cohort our users based on the contribution. I mean, easy one is like average revenue contribution per week or per month, and then you manage your cohorts of like this cohort, trying to graduate them to the next level, kind of thing. And as long as you're at the right technology, it doesn't take, I would also say promos and offers is a thing in lifecycle. And so automating that decisioning, making it easy for marketers at any level to create their own promos and offers. That's always kind of a headache from a process perspective. Making sure that those are tagged properly too. Something that I think a lot of UA people, if they get into managing lifecycle, is making sure they attribute a promo or an offer, any kind of merch, discount, anything that they're doing that is basically a cost of to the user. So associating not just the lifetime value of the user, but the lifetime cost of that user, and making sure that they're thinking about that as they, don't just promo, and then they realize that all they're doing is fire sales all the time to get their users to, consume content and buy stuff.
Sure. So you've taken a team, or you, correct me if I'm wrong, did you inherit a team that was primarily UA focused and then adapt them to
no, I don't get that. I have to build teams from the ground up. I've never inherited a team.
I have seen teams where the UA folks are they're comped. They get a big chunk of their bonus from the number of users they bring in. But that doesn't sound like it's highly compatible with the type of model that you're advocating here, which is bringing in quality users. So what have you done to getting on the brass tacks with comp, so so to speak? What have you done to fix how you incentivize individuals that are now more responsible for full stack?
So my team is not comped or bonused on how much they spend and how many new users they drive. They're comped on the contribution to the overall business. So that can go in many ways. That's revenue for new user growth, but also could be existing user growth, and it ultimately is too. So I don't push people to spend money. We only care about what is best for the business, and sometimes that's not spending anything or reinvesting what we would have spent on new user growth to growing existing cohort revenue, which is in the form of promos and offers and anything that goes to contributing to that. And that's how we think about it. So cross-selling, upselling, that goes into that other bucket. So then, if you think about it from a UA perspective, instead of the only levers you have to optimize are, well, this is my money and this is the channel I run or the channels I run, and sometimes budget allocation or updating creatives here and there, trying, everyone, lookalike audience is great. That's the lion's share for like Facebook spend, but like, there's not a lot outside of that. So now if the levers are, well, I don't necessarily need to spend it in new user growth and these channels. I actually could use that money, go to product and say, hey, we're actually hitting a point where we don't need to spend anymore. But in order to grow our business this month or this quarter or this year, I think we actually need to be focused more on, existing revenue growth. And that means that my UA team becomes more actual growth rather than UA, and they don't force spend, and now they have more levers to optimize. They can put promos, offers, cross-selling and upselling, and also UA. So it's actually just adding more optimization levers than they had before.
Interesting. So how far down the proverbial rabbit hole does your team go with this? I mean, so obviously there's user retention, there's onboarding, which is kind of fairly traditional lifecycle marketing types of functions, and then you get right down into the merchandising. You get into live operations. Let me pause there. For those of you not in the gaming space, live operations is a kind of a term specific to gaming, referring to all the event planning you do with games, the daily challenges, the weekend events, the tournaments, and so forth, and then of course the actual monetization of the players. So the members of your team go all the way down into the actual the event planning and the monetization of players in your case.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on it depends on the game, and it depends also, I would say for EA might be an anomaly because of how big we are and of an operation, but it also depends on how efficient you are as an operation. So it could be more that your growth team is more like an activation team in a sense, and you work and partner with a live service team, and you help make sure that the events that are being planned and all of that align to, okay, yeah, that contest will help us, drive this revenue that we need and things like that. You could also be the idea guy or gal and be the one that actually does all that strategy. And so I think it's a little bit of like, if there's already an existing live service team, you might be the activation side of that instance. I think from like offers and promos and stuff, that tip, like that's more handled, I think, in a growth team. Some people might see it differently. There's a lot of different makeups too of teams that I think now it's becoming a little bit more blurred, which when people start stepping on each other's pumas, they get a little bit persnickety about like who owns what. And I don't really care who owns what as long as the job gets done. And so I think that, and whatever is best for the players too. So it's really based too upon like what's more important, like what's the most important things in your game, and having the dedicated resources for the in-game stuff that is really, really important. And then making sure you're as efficient as possible. And that context of like, these users we're driving, also this is what's going to work for the users that we're acquiring. And that's why like the UA side is starting to have that context about what has worked to get those users into the game. So why not allow them to, now that they have that context, to leverage that to say, and this is what's going to keep them in the game, and this is what we want to test, and this is how we want to go about it, and like actually doing that work.
Interesting. And correct me if I'm wrong, but at EA, because you have so many gaming titles, you have a bit of an advantage in that you can use one of your gaming titles to promote other gaming titles that are offered by EA.
I mean, we're not the only ones, I think, going after that thought, but yeah, I mean, like a network that gets you away from the need to look at new user growth without understanding what the existing, what that user's about. If you have a relationship with them, if you know any information about them, the likes of Zynga and AppLovin, they do have their own networks to acquire and reacquire and cross-sell and upsell. So, I think that the privacy stuff is forcing the larger players, I think, in the space to think about how to create an ecosystem that allows for cycling players and making sure that you're keeping them within your, if they're going to leave your game, make sure they go to another one of your games.
Exactly. I'm going to have to assume that most of the people listening in don't have that advantage, don't have that opportunity, and probably only have like one app. I'm guessing most organizations have a single app. So what do you recommend to them in a situation where they don't have that opportunity to do cross promotion of their apps or their titles and so forth? Any specific advice you can offer to
There's two things. Look at where you're buying most of your inventory and go acquire that title. Also, like I said, retained revenue growth is something that not a lot of people are focusing on. And if you can do it better than anyone else, like that's an advantage. And the last thing I think, which is more of that shift in mentality or best practices, is it used to be the notion of friction within a FTUE, the first time user experience. It was like, make it as frictionless as possible to get a user into your game, into your app. Well, now maybe a sign up wall, registration, that type of activity and friction actually offsets the negative impact of drop off. If you can start that relationship or even get that connection point to get that email address, get that identifier, and start that relationship sooner than, and potentially it's like a natural filter of higher value users, ones that actually have higher intent than players that wouldn't otherwise. And so I think we're going to see a lot more registration and sign up walls in apps where it used to not be as relevant unless it was more of a government or some sort of regulated industry that app may have been in. And so, yeah, I think you're just going to, I mean, look at like Genshin Impact. You have to sign in. I have to sign in, and then it downloads for like an hour on my phone every time I open it. So yeah, I think you're just going to see a little bit more of that, which is not a bad thing, but it also changes the game of like the mentality isn't get as many people through the Fatui. It's make sure that you get the right people in through the Fatui.
You actually kind of tipped upon one of the other questions that I had for you, which is around the collection of email addresses or phone numbers, or some other means of communicating with the user. In the gaming space, at a minimum, there's a bit of a mentality of no, we don't do email, we don't email our gaming clients. But it turns out, I would say a good half of the gaming clients that we have at Lean Plum do in fact collect email, and it works extremely well. For those clients, and is EA also making a big initiative to collect email addresses and other forms of communication?
Well, I think when people say we don't do email, it doesn't work, it's usually they do a shit job at communicating. So I think this goes back to poor segmentation, poor understanding of why a player came in the first place, and this goes also back to why UA sometimes is that linchpin into better email communication. I'll tell you why. So if you've acquired a player through a Tom Brady ad, let's say, don't email him with something or don't email the player with something that is totally irrelevant to Tampa Bay or Tom Brady. Put Tom Brady in the effing email, And I don't think that a lot of lifecycle, the handshake between UA and lifecycle does that well enough of, well, how did we get that player in? And not just like the call to action, but like, what was that exact creative? What was it about? Where did that get served? How did we get that player into the game or into the app or that user? And then making sure that's associated into why they continue to come back, or why we need, or how we will get them back and get their attention. And so it's not that email doesn't work, it's that, everyone does a shit job at it, or, we send too many all the time too. EA, we don't send a lot of email. And it's not used. I think because I have a strong stance, we have a strong stance on it, but I think again, you got to do it in the right way. And if all you're doing is blasting, users without any relevancy, they're just either going to put you in the spam bucket or they're going to ignore you. And it's just a wasted touch point. So, I see it as just like, you got to have the right context. And a lot of it comes back to like, how do they get into your game or your app in the first place?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes complete sense. So tell me about the results. So you're probably ahead of the curve compared to a lot of organizations in this idea of turning your UA folks into more full stack marketers. Have you quantified the results? Have you done before and after comparisons of the analytics to see whether or not you in fact are getting better players and that has led to better monetization?
I don't think I have any external hard numbers to tell you, but I think there's a few results. There's the people results in terms of top talent, like what top A talent in UA doesn't want to take on the problem of trying to connect the docs to lifecycle and actually getting that responsibility and getting that, to be able to be a full stack growth person. So you're acquiring higher talent if you are able to offer that and connect those dots. And then, you're a better partner to the product team. You're more relevant. And I think that that's the other big thing too, is that our growth team, way more relevant in conversation with the product, and we're true product partners with them. And so we help them, hey, there's, we have a feature adoption issue. Great. Okay. So that growth person tries to help that too, just as much as they're like, all right, we're good on new user growth. Okay. We're lower on our existing user growth. All right. And so like, there's just a lot more effectiveness and the energy going to making sure that the right problems are being solved at the right time, rather than always thinking as long as we're pumping as much money in as possible to get new users, it's fine. But in reality, it hits your margin. There is going to be a point where you can't grow, you can't spend any more on UA. or it's going to flatline. And if you haven't done lifecycle, or you haven't been focused on it from the get-go, then you're gonna have a really hard time catching up, since UA's been spending and burning all this money. So I'm gonna say burning, investing this money. So I think the performance, and like we're still new on it, so like I'm not gonna BS people and say like, it's 3x but it's the right thing to do. Like this is the path that we're going down, and I can tell you that it's the right thing to do.
Awesome. We have a ton of questions coming in, which I want to get to in just a second. But I guess the final question I have for the moment, until we look at some of the audience questions, is if you were to offer some advice to a UA person that is still in this throw it over the wall kind of culture, and that might be kind of a harsh way of putting it, but you get the idea.
Oh, it is.
What can you plot out sort of a bit of a roadmap, if you will, to that UA director on how to adapt their staff to more of the full stack marketing that you're talking about?
Yeah, I think understanding what a CDP is and how it can help you. Talk to your when you talk to your product team, instead of talking to them about just do a better job monetizing the players we're bringing in, start to look at the players you are bringing in and what they're doing in the game, and not in relation to how it's impacting the ROAS of the campaigns for UA, but how those players are they like our highest value players? Are they not like our highest value players? What features do they adopt, or what do they not play that these other higher users are playing? And start testing. I mean, like that's the thing that I think that there is some common ground, is just testing, just like on UA, that's testing. And I think the other thing too is make sure that you're using the same exact data. It's the same user, the tables are exactly the same, that the product team uses the same metrics too, and the definitions are exactly the same. And as long as you start to make apples and apples rather than apples and oranges, then you can start to do that full stack. And because if you ask your team to start doing that right away, and you don't have the right tools, they don't have the right metrics, they don't, just think about it from like, if you're executing all of that, like what do you need? And don't be a jerk about like forcing your team to do something that they will fail in doing. And it does take work. It takes, signing on new vendors in different ways. And also if you're managing it, thinking about your budget collectively. So not just this goes to my channels, but this is my overall budget, and that can be invested in new user growth. It can be invested in funding promos and offers, and how that all like goes together.
Excellent. Well, like I said, we've got a bunch of questions that I want to try to get through, at least some of them. This first one is from Andrew, and he asks, how do you keep the team motivated while dealing with all the change and disruption from iOS 14 plus?
A lot of humor, a lot of motivation, just like motivational quotes. Yeah, motivational quotes. Everyone's in the same boat. I don't get mad at them. Like, there's attribution issues. You don't get mad at your team for things that are just totally out of their control. And be empathetic about it. And you come up with the plan B and plan C. So if we're having measurement issues, I try to figure out a proxy that can at least give us air cover, give my team air cover, so they can breathe and think about it. And think about it as, we're going to solve this problem, rather than, the executives are asking us to do X, Y, and Z, and like trying to just shove a bunch of solutions at them. Instead, you provide the air cover and let your team come up with those solutions, while you're trying to just make sense of the overall, the highest of the high, and just say, keep things steady right now, and just focus on, as a team, testing and figuring out the problem, talking to other growth teams. So, my team talks to other companies too. And, the way to get motivated is like, we're all in this together. Yeah.
Cool. Next question is interesting here. It says, my question is regarding the providers in the attribution space. How are they adapting to this in your experience? And is this changing your team's views on these types of tools?
Yeah. Well, I've said a lot about fingerprinting with MMPs and how, you know, Apple's very strong and has a stance on that. I think it is interesting that now Apple is sending sending all postbacks now back to us as an advertiser. It does create an interesting question and situation of what does an MMP provide, and you know. We have a great relationship with our MMP Singular and like, you know, spend aggregator plus a lot of other things, but like there's a lot of other things that they do. I would say that if your MMP is only providing attribution, like that's a little concerning. So yeah, like right now, Apple's basically forcing all of us to be our own attribution partners, which at least, you know, the luxury at EA is that we have the you know, the manpower to do that. But, you know, a lot of people aren't EA. And so I think that that's also like, I feel for, and so if you aren't like an EA, you do have to rely on, you know, your attribution partner, because you probably can't ingest all of those postbacks and also if you don't have the luxury of a data science team to create that model, then you are relying on your MMP.
Mm-hmm. Understood. I've got a question here from Claire. She asks, are revenue growth strategies of users, I think what she's trying to say here is country-based or worldwide-based?
I think it depends. I mean, we have country-based for like the top 2 or 3 markets. We have country-based revenue goals. And then outside of that, it kind of becomes larger territories and then global. So it depends on the game and where that game's popular. So if that game is popular in Japan and the US, and then it becomes global. So then we have a US number, a Japan number, and a global number. And that's actually how I manage my budget for that game.
Gotcha. This question is from Dan. He says, seems like most brands use major drives to drive mobile UA like Google, Facebook, app stores, etc. What are the main qualifiers when using secondary affiliate networks like AdColony, FoodMob, or Open Media?
I mean, the reality is what, like 40–50% of your money goes to Facebook. Then the rest goes between Google and, you know, Snap or TikTok and a bunch of others. And then after that, then you have a programmatic, you have a DSP 1, 2, 3, or whoever. And then you have your ad networks and your affiliates. I mean, to be honest, I haven't, like, affiliates is probably like one of the least knowledge, like the area, like we have affiliate partnerships in the past. I have run, you know, managed affiliates, but it hasn't been like my big focus. And so affiliates has never been larger than maybe 5 to less than 10% of my overall budget. So it's never been something I've been overly focused on because the juice was never worth the squeeze. It is something we do. It is something that I continue to do, and I still think it's part of the strategy. But you know, it's never, from a scale perspective, it's never going to be like 50% of my budget.
Gotcha.
So I guess the criteria is make sure it's not fraudy and have a really good relationship with a direct relationship with your affiliate partner. You know, but again, like it can get sketchy. So I mean, just make sure you're on them. Yeah, make sure you're on them and that you can get transparency to some degree. And when they say they can't give you click data and they give you some bullshit about something, like just really push them on it, because that's not accurate. And a lot of affiliates will buy programmatic inventory and do some stuff that, you know, buy paid social still and things like that. So, you know, there are great affiliate partners though too. So I don't want to throw them all under the bus, but you know, so you got to be on top of it.
Makes sense. Another question here is, this is kind of going back to what we talked about earlier about the collection of email addresses. Essentially, he's asking, or he or she is asking, do you recommend incentivizing users to provide their email address or some other?
Out of the get-go? I would say overall, no. And I would say it depends on where you get them from, and it depends on the call to action. This is where it is important during the FTUE, during the first time user experience, that if you have the ability and the capabilities in your game or your app, that you think about this and test like, okay, if the creative and the call to action in the channel is a little bit more incentivized. So when you're buying non-incent versus incent, then you get to the registration and sign up, page, incentivizing, with a player that is already assuming there's incentivization. Basically, once you start incentivizing a player, they just assume that everything's either going to be half off all the time, or they're only going to do something when they're incentivized. So when you have wholesale things, or if you think about a player over the life cycle, and you start with incentivization when they have come in either organically or through a non-incent channel, I don't think that's always the best approach, because you start off the relationship with, we'll give away all of our stuff for free, and you kind of like start on a journey of you can't come back from that. Once you start incentivizing a player, it's really hard not to get them to they'll just keep waiting for those sales or price shop. So
interesting. I would have thought to incentivize them. So that
again, this goes back to like scale versus quality users. If you incentivize, you're going to get more players that probably convert, that go through that process. But are they going to be higher value than if you actually had lesser players going through that without an incentivization, and you actually had higher LTVs of those players?
Gotcha. That's okay. That's counterintuitive to me. That's really interesting. This question might be for both of us, asking essentially about the what skills transfer between user acquisition and then user retention, monetization, and so forth. I can take a first stab at kind of answering from my perspective. To testing. I mean, I've been in digital marketing now, I don't know for how long, I'd be 20 plus years or so, and the consistent theme that I have seen, almost regardless of the function within marketing, the testing is, I think, by far the most valuable actual tool, or process, if you will. So testing messages, testing the look and feel of the app or the website, test everything. And I assume that testing is a big part of what you do in user acquisition. Yeah. And the mentality of testing, the practice, the understanding of the data and analytics behind it, and so forth, from my perspective, translates directly into everything that occurs downstream from acquiring a user. What else do you see as being a transferable skill? The segmentation, because segmenting is a big deal in retention and monetization. Is a big thing in user acquisition? Overall,
so I've been in UA before even the App Store, so I'm a dinosaur. When I came back into mobile games, I was all about like, oh, let's, we got to start segmenting before we just start spray and pray. But the reality is that segmenting, let's say in Facebook, you start segmenting players. Well, first of all, the lion's share of your money in Facebook goes to lookalike audiences. But then outside of that, like, okay, we're going to segment our users, players that look like this or have this demographic and are interested in this. And as soon as you start narrowing and cutting those segments, the price goes up typically from a CPM perspective, and the audience, it gets more narrow. So although it makes sense to segment, it rarely backs out from a ROAS perspective when you're just thinking about best practice for UA. So it kind of became like a, the UA people that I worked with, like at Machine Zone, let's say, or, there'd be like, no, it's not about like, we'll do this. We do, we have our suppression list, but like segmentation is not really a thing. But in lifecycle, it is like, what's the motivation of these players, like cohorting ones that look like this. And so you kind of are doing your own lookalikes in a sense internally with lifecycle. And so I would say, UA people need to like kind of train up a little bit on segmentation. And product people talk about segmentation all the time. Our head of product at EA Mobile, her and I, we talk about segmentation all the time. It is a thing, but it's not necessarily something you talk about in UA.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Obviously, it's vital for retention purposes and so forth. So that's obviously a valuable skill to learn if you're UA and you're not utilizing segmentation heavily. We're getting some interesting commentary regarding. We're going back to the incentivizing thing now. Matt basically says that sharing an email sounds like a friction for a player, and Cynthia comments, but comments by saying incentivization doesn't necessarily have to be monetary. It could be a gaming tip or something non-monetary. So what do you think about that?
I think Cynthia's onto something. Yeah, I think a pro tip here and there could be interesting. Yeah, I think when I think about incentivization, I default the UA of like it's monetary based, it's coins, it's this, it's something free. But a tip, if they like that, I think that could be, and that could be interesting. Like I said, just think about something that they're not going to be expecting every single instance. So if they're expecting something free or something discounted, but if they're expecting, a tip might be nice, a little, that's a little nice welcome into the game. So yeah, I
have personally experienced useful emails in a couple of the games that I play. I won't reveal the titles, but you in some of the games that I've been playing, you could spend months and months getting from level 7 to level 8.
Yeah.
And then upon doing so, a lot of the game changes. Suddenly, you're now up against other people who were level 8, and they have their forces fully built out and their defenses fully built out. I'm revealing a bit about the type of game it is. But inevitably, upon my leveling up, I get an email that actually provides tips and tricks for my having just reached level 8. Here's some things you might want to know. Here's some attack strategies. They provide links to some YouTubers that have done interesting things. So again, along the lines of what Cynthia was talking about, it doesn't have to be virtual currency you're throwing.
Totally.
It could be information. It could be it's almost community feeling like.
I mean, like Discord channels to support and help onboard players. I think sometimes players and players help each other more than, so I think there's a ton of great active Discords too of communities that are helping each other. I mean, I'm a big fan of YouTube tutorials. I do it for how to do my makeup to like how to fix my pool heater. So, all about it. So yeah, I very much agree.
Cool. We got another question from Dan. He asks, does Facebook get a lion's share of most brands' mobile UA budget mainly because of their reach and scale, or because their self-service tools are built for mobile brands?
No, high value users. Like since the iOS 14 impact across the board of all my friendlies I've asked, Facebook, their ability to drive high value users totally diminished on iOS. Scale and reach, not an issue, but we used to use, we still do use Facebook, but a lot of it was because they always drove the highest value players.
Got it. And I think in the process, we just answered Carl's question as well, but let me know otherwise, Carl. Another question from Matt. He asks, what are your thoughts on ads where creatives don't show the actual gameplay of a game, but converting much better?
I mean, when I was at Machine Zone, we had a playable that was totally irrelevant of the game itself. And it was the best best creative that we ever ran for acquisition. But players would always be like pissed because they like the playable better than like the actual game. So again, it goes back to like, are you throwing shit over the fence?
Mm-hmm.
And then you get into the issue with like, the Gardeningscape stuff and like the Playrix stuff of like the playables being so different than the actual gameplay. I think, again, it goes back to like, are you trying to drive the most installs you can, or are you trying to drive the highest value player? So if you have a gameplay that is totally irrelevant, even like, let's say you have like a 4X game and you're showing like some casual game, like you're not gonna be driving the right, players. You're gonna be driving the right game types. I think similar to like, when you sign on an IP that has a very iconic brand, and the players come in because they like that brand, they tend to actually be the lesser value players. The players end up being your highest value players, the players that like that type of game. So I think it's kind of like similar to that. Like if your hook is like the brand itself, but they don't like that game type, you know, or the hook is you're playable, but it has nothing to do with your game. You're gonna end up paying for it.
Yep. Dan asked one more question. Thank you, Dan, for all the great questions. He asked, "What about Android?" And I assume what he means by that is that that a lot of the focus around these discussions have been around iOS 14.5. Yeah. But I'm going to assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, Janie, that what you're advocating is not the direct result of iOS 14.5. It's just a better thing to do, regardless. Yeah. And I'm not as knowledgeable in this area as I'm sure you are, but I'm assuming that these privacy changes are coming to Android as well. So it's a kind of.
The first one is like what Google announced, which is similar to what Apple did in 2016 or whatever that was. And if you look at it, like the impact is not the same as like what Apple did this year to what Google is doing. It'll probably impact you anywhere from like 2 to 12 to 15%, depending on the lat traffic that you already have coming into your games or not coming into your games and apps. So, but assume that wherever you have your distribution of apps and games, that privacy will get tighter and tighter.
Gotcha. Okay, excellent. Well, we're down to looks like about 2 minutes left or so, and I think I've gotten through all the questions. Any final thoughts? I have one myself, which is if it isn't obvious yet, taking care of your users, taking care of your customers, communicating with them the way they want to be communicated with, personalizing your messages and so forth is just vital. UA is getting more expensive in many ways. When you acquire them, keep them. Any final thoughts from you, Janie?
Yeah, I think echoing. Support your players. Do good by them, but also make sure to take care of yourself. It is Pride Month too, so I want to say Happy Pride to people. Be good to each other. Be good human beings. Do what's right for the players and do what's right for you and for the people around you. And yeah, good luck.
Great. Well, I think that's a great way to close off APS. Awesome. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Thank you.
Well, yes, what a great way to end the event. And thanks for those sentiments, Jane. That's brilliant. That's a lovely way to end. And really happy we had such a great high energy end to the 29th session. And thank you, everyone, for all those questions. And yeah, Barry, I think you could be a professional interviewer. You sort of just guided us through there. Obviously helped a lot by who you're interviewing. But that was really excellent. So, yeah, perfect way to end the show. Session 29. Thank you so much. And, yeah, thanks, everyone, for joining us. And, yeah, see you soon, hopefully in person.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.